Hello and welcome to the CSN3M Mindset Monday podcast. I'm Andrew Wade with Case Specific Nutrition. On this channel, we focus on the three M's: mindsets, myth busting, and mentoring, all as they pertain to health and nutrition. This podcast is brought to you by the OptiLife Academy, Case Specific's very own online do-it-yourself wellness course that allows you to work on optimizing your health and habits from anywhere with an internet connection. Be sure to check out the free trial at optilifeacademy.com or by clicking the link below in the show notes. Use the code ANDREW at checkout for 10% off your purchase. On today's episode of CSN3M, we will be myth-busting sodium. Bum, bum, bum. I feel like every time I talk about sodium, that's how it feels and that's how it sounds. I feel like that noise needs to follow me around during the week when I had this discussion. And after I tallied up having it 7 times in 4 days the other day, I said, you know what? I think it's time that I blasted a podcast out into the world about it. Sodium is very unique. It is one of our micronutrients, and as a result, it has a recommended daily allowance, or an RDA, that is set out by the FDA. But what's really unique about sodium is it's really the only nutrient that, or micronutrient, I should say, that we spend most of our time talking about reducing. The recommended daily allowance for most people is trying to get enough of it, something. So trying to get enough of your calcium, trying to get enough of your vitamin D, trying to get enough of your iron, trying to give yourself adequate nutrients so that your body can sustain all of its functions and purposes and values. But for most people, the RDA for sodium is a note about restriction. Or at least it's perceived that way. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to sort of discuss this commonly misunderstood and sometimes unintentionally criminalized part of our diet. So first things first, sodium is one of our most important electrolytes. It is involved in our sodium-potassium pump in our body. That pump helps fluids and different nutrients go in and out of cells, almost like a drawbridge or an entry system. Sodium is essential for muscle contraction, and when I say muscle contraction, I do mean all muscles, so that does include your heart, and that is what I am saying is yes, sodium is essential for the heart. But as with anything, there is such a thing as too much and too little. And so one of the reasons why most people watch their sodium or are told to watch their sodium or are told to reduce their sodium is because sodium is very commonly used in preserving food, and then is also commonly used in trying to enhance the taste of food. And so sodium's kind of unique because most of our other micronutrients, we don't just sprinkle randomly on our food. We don't sprinkle some magnesium to add flavor. We don't crush up calcium carbonate to add a little bit of taste to a dish. But we crush up Himalayan sea salt and Morton's iodized salt, for flavor. So the FDA recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day for most adults. And the general suggestion is that most people target or move towards a goal of 1,500 milligrams. And that's a really important note because that is the amount that our body needs. And so what ends up happening, as with, is opposite with all the other supplements. If I tell somebody that they need 75 milligrams of vitamin C a day, what happens? We sell 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C because more is better, right? And unfortunately, that is very untrue. Most people, when they consume a 1,000 milligram vitamin C, end up getting somewhere in the realm of 70 milligrams of it. But we can save that controversial comment and topic for another day. But sodium's interesting because just like with the vitamin C, where I told you you need this much, and then people strove to get more of it, the FDA tends to recommend we try and reduce our sodium, so we need to aim to only get 1,500. And so in true human fashion, we decide that sodium's terrible and we aim for 0. And I wanted to make sure that I spoke today about that so that people could understand that aside from all of the drama and the chaos, sodium is one of the single most important nutrients in our body. We need it. If you don't get any of it, you will notice that you start holding water in your ankles, you will swell, you will not be able to put fluids in your cells properly, you will get malnourished, and you will notice muscle cramping, among other problems. And so we need sodium. But most people in the United States, the average American now consumes 6,600 milligrams of sodium a day. And remember, that is 6,600, and our recommendation is 1,500. Now, one thing that's worth always thinking about when someone says the average person, or when I say the average American, is what is the average American, and do you fall into that category? The average American also eats out a minimum of 4 nights a week and consumes fast food 3 to 5 days per week. And this is extremely crucial to note, in addition to the average American, who also consumes a great deal of processed snacks, chips and crackers and other frozen items. Not to say that all frozen things are bad, but watching the amount of sodium in them can be very useful. So for someone like myself, I don't really watch my sodium, and that's because my wife and I cook most of our meals. I eat out maybe once, if not twice a week at most, and we eat very minimal processed food. And normal food like a chicken breast, normal food like a bag of frozen broccoli with no sauce on it, for example, and rice that we've made, or one that we bought that's in a 90-second pouch that has no added ingredients. You can have a chicken breast that's frozen, some frozen broccoli, and a bag of Uncle Ben's ready-made brown rice, and that entire meal has less than 100 milligrams. But then you can turn around and have the frozen broccoli that's in the teriyaki sauce, and it's at 500 milligrams. Or you can turn around and have the ready-made rices that have a chicken flavor to them, and they're 690. Or you can do a chicken breast that's been injected with sodium, and the sodium content's at 350. And so sodium in frozen foods, as a side note, is not always present, and so it's important to read the label, turn it over, look on the nutrient label. Sodium is always listed, and recognize that most natural foods, most minimally processed foods have very little. And so particularly in like bodybuilding communities, I have to actually have them add sodium because most of them will eat only minimally processed food. And as a result, they naturally get 300 or 400 milligrams of sodium. And with their activity level, next thing they know, their ankles are swelling up and their body's holding water. So sodium is very unique. I like to give a sort of comparison. I just gave that chicken rice broccoli, and said, okay, it's like 100 milligrams or maybe even 150, somewhere in that range, depending on where you bought it and how it was sourced. If you go to Chipotle and you get a salad there and you get the chicken and the fajitas and you put some beans on it and then you get the salsas, you're going to be eating just shy of 3,000 milligrams, which there's a lot of other very healthy components in that Chipotle meal. But one of the things that we rarely can escape at restaurants is that they load up the sodium. Breakfast sandwiches at fast food places have 1,500 and 1,800 milligrams. Most restaurants, if you go out to eat, you're going to get 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000 milligrams. And so the average American getting 6,600 milligrams comes from eating food that they don't have any sort of control of the preparation of, or comes from buying very heavily processed food that we can easily identify by turning over the label and taking a look at it. Condensed soups are another good example. An average can of soup has 1,500 or 1,600 milligrams, but we can find soups like Progresso that have lower sodium, and even Campbell's Heart Healthy line that has less sodium and has some potassium to help balance it out. But for my athletes out there, or for my physically active people out there, something that's really important to remember is that sodium is not bad for you. I repeat, sodium is not bad for you. And that really goes out to everybody. But something to note, particularly for athletes, is that when you exercise, you burn or sweat out, you sweat out somewhere between 400 and 700 milligrams of sodium per quart of sweat. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but a quart of sweat is a 2-pound weight loss. And for anybody who's ever hit a boot camp workout or done some sort of long cardio session, if you weigh yourself before you do it and weigh yourself after, you're down to just over a quart of fluid. And that means you've sweat out at least 400, if not up to 700 milligrams. And a lot of athletes sweat out more than that. I have quite a few male athletes in particular that will lose 4 and 5 pounds during an intense bout of exercise. And there are sodium additions that we need to consider there. And that is part of the reason why I mentioned earlier that my wife and I don't really watch our sodium all that much. And it's because we're both very physically active. We exercise in some way most days of the week, and when we do exercise, we exercise either intensely or with long duration. And so we sweat out usually somewhere in the 500 to 1,000 milligram, which means we need that in addition to our 1,500 milligrams. That is to keep our body stable, that is to replenish the stores and muscles, that is so that our body can function completely normally. And so sodium is a very complicated topic because on one hand, we have Americans that go out to eat too often and eat too many packaged processed foods or eat really low cost frozen foods that add up the sodium and get us to an average of 6,600 milligrams. But then on the other side, we realize that the goal is not to get zero, but instead to get somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000, depending on activity. And I would say the reason that the FDA says 1,500 to 2,300 is because that covers most people in terms of the physical activity that a typical person gets. An athlete is going to sometimes need more than that 23. And for those people, we're calculating sweat rate and determining sodium losses, and we're oftentimes supplementing it in some way or encouraging them to have a treat meal after an intense event. So there you have it. Sodium is, kind of a two-sided item where too much and too little can be bad. And I hope that this is sort of an interesting perspective for you, especially if you've, utilized in your health journey, I got to cut out or I got to watch my sodium, that we know where we're looking at it. If I was going to give you sort of the quick takeaways, it would be that you need your 1,500 milligrams. We're not restricting under that. Think of that as a floor and think of the 2,300 milligrams as the ideal ceiling. So we're landing in that range, varying slightly based on activity. The biggest thing that you can do if you want to reduce your sodium is really not at home. I will say that at home, the things you can do are make sure the frozen items you're buying are lower in sodium items. Bird's eye steam fresh vegetables do not have added sodium unless there's a sauce. Ready-made rices and other items like that oftentimes do not have added sodium unless there's a sauce. And even frozen meats, if they're of high quality or if they claim natural or organic, a lot of times will not contain sodium. So reading the label. But really, for those of you most interested in reducing sodium, going out to eat less is the answer to that question. It is the single simplest way to reduce your sodium content. A heavy amount of the salt is going to come from going out to eat. There's no world where you cook food at home and get to 6,600 milligrams. It just does not happen that way. I talk with people very regularly, and one of the things that I always hear is like, I'm, watching my snacks, so I bought some no salt added nuts, or I bought the no salt added chips, or I bought the no salt added pretzels. And while I'm not going to be somebody that insults those notions, something to keep in mind is that a normal serving of nuts only has 150 milligrams of sodium on average. Same thing with chips and pretzels. And so while going from 150 to 30, for example, is a reduction, that is meant really more for people who are on extremely restricted sodium diets, people just coming down off of a heart attack, or somebody who's overeating and snacking those foods in a big way. Eating 5 and 6 servings of chips adds up. But for most of us, the first place we should start is asking how often we go out to eat, looking at that and figuring out ways to eat at home more. And then second would be any frozen or canned meals that we're utilizing, trying to compare the options and the brands at the store for the ones that are reduced in sodium as a really good opportunity. And then from there, we can take a look at some of our, smaller contributors like our snack foods. But again, I think a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are actually going to be more interested in the opposite of, which is, I don't have to always be micromanaging this, especially if I'm eating food naturally made at home. The other big, claim is, sodium is actually essential for me. So there you have it. That is our myth bust of the day. Sodium as both a healthy thing and something that we need to watch. So it is once again not a this or that. It is somewhere in between. I'd like to thank you again for listening. Please subscribe to our channel and share us on your favorite social media, tagging a friend or a loved one that you think would benefit from my rantings and ramblings. Don't forget to do your part and hashtag spread the health. For more case-specific content, follow us on all social media at Case Specific Nutrition and check out our website, casespecificnutrition.com. We'll be back next week with another CSN3M Mindset Monday.